Hey everyone! Welcome to Update X24H, your go-to channel for the latest news, hottest dramas, breaking stories, and all the buzz from the world of entertainment. We're here to keep you updated, entertained, and always in the loop. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing family, because here at Update X24H, we bring you the news that matters, the drama you love, and the stories you can't miss. Thanks for being part of our community. Let's stay connected, stay updated, and keep the good vibes rolling. They said it was an accident, but deep down no one believed it. On September 11, 2025, Menglong, the man who once smiled through every hardship, was gone. Yet what if his death wasn't the end, but the beginning of a truth no one dares to tell? This is Menglong's last secret. In the quiet hours before tragedy struck, the world still believed Menglong was simply taking another step in his ordinary life. He was seen near Beijing airport, dressed in plain clothes, his expression calm yet distant, as though his thoughts wandered somewhere far beyond the city lights. To the unknowing eye, nothing seemed unusual. He was the same polite actor who often bowed to fans, spoke gently, and disappeared into the crowd without drama. But in retrospect, every frame of those final sightings feels heavy with meaning, as if the silence around him was already whispering farewell. When the news of his death broke, that calm image shattered. Within minutes, social media became a storm of disbelief and grief. Fans replayed the last videos of him walking alone, searching for signs they had missed. And then came the recording, faint, fractured, unbearably real. A man's voice trembling, shouting in fear, followed by a violent crash. Many insisted it was Yu's voice. Others refused to believe it could be. Yet beneath the noise and panic, one truth echoed. The voice carried pure terror, the sound of someone being hunted, or running from something unseen. The internet became an open wound. People analyzed every second, every sound wave, every rumor, desperate to understand what had really happened that night. How could a man so peaceful, so devoted to his craft, end his journey in chaos? What had he discovered that made him so afraid? The world, once content with celebrity headlines, now stared into the abyss of something much darker. And as the first wave of grief settled, one haunting thought began to spread. Menglong had not simply died. He had vanished into a silence that demanded to be broken. In the days that followed, fear began to harden into suspicion. What was once shock transformed into a quiet, collective unease that spread through the public like a shadow no one could ignore. Anonymous posts began to appear on hidden corners of the internet, claiming that Menglong had been investigating something far greater than himself, the invisible machinery that powered fame, and the quiet cruelty that devoured those who resisted it. These whispers spoke of contracts signed in silence, of young artists manipulated until their spirits broke, and of a system that punished honesty more harshly than failure. At first, people dismissed these claims as online hysteria. Yet the more they searched, the more inconsistencies emerged. How could the investigation into Yu's death have been closed so quickly? Why were witnesses discouraged from speaking? Why did certain files vanish from public access within hours? It no longer felt like a simple accident. It felt like a story deliberately rewritten. Tianyu Media, his management agency, soon became the focus of public scrutiny. For years it had represented some of the brightest stars in China's entertainment industry, but beneath its glittering surface lay a history of sudden departures, unexplainable breakdowns, and whispered disappearances. Former trainees spoke of unbearable pressure, of dreams sold for obedience. A disturbing pattern began to form, one that mirrored Yu's own exhaustion and the tension visible in his final public appearances. The air thickened with questions no one dared to answer. Fear had turned into fuel, the kind that burns in the hearts of those who sense a truth being buried alive. And for the first time, the world began to suspect that Menglong's death was not an isolated tragedy, but the exposed corner of something vast, orchestrated, and unspeakably dark. As the storm surrounding Menglong's death deepened, an old name resurfaced from the forgotten corners of memory: Lu Jirong, the actress who had vanished without explanation years before. Her story returned like an echo from the past, hauntingly familiar, almost prophetic. She had once been one of the industry's brightest hopes, a young woman with soft eyes and quiet determination who captured hearts with her grace and sincerity. Then at the height of her fame she disappeared. No farewell interviews, no final projects, only a single post on her personal account that read, "I am tired of being a puppet controlled by invisible strings." Within minutes, that message was erased, as if her voice had been swallowed by the very silence she feared. Fans searched for her, journalists asked questions, but the agency remained unmoved. They called it a personal matter, and the world moved on. Yet when Yu's name became the center of tragedy, Lu Jirong's absence suddenly made sense in a way that terrified everyone. People began drawing lines between their stories, both signed to the same agency, both young, both quietly suffering under an unseen weight. The resemblance was not coincidence. It was a mirror held up to the system itself. Rumors spread that Yu had been looking into her disappearance, piecing together fragments that others had ignored. He might have discovered what truly happened to her, and that knowledge may have sealed his fate. The mystery of Lu Jirong was no longer just a missing person case. It became the ghost that lingered over Yu's final days. Two souls bound by silence, consumed by the same shadow, now existed as warnings, reminders of what it costs to speak truth in a world built on control. The deeper people looked, the clearer the connection became. Yu Menglong and Lu Jirong were two sides of the same haunting truth. Both had stood under the same lights, signed their names to the same agency, and carried the same exhaustion hidden behind practiced smiles. Their lives followed identical rhythms, rising too fast, suffocating too quietly, and vanishing too suddenly. What had once seemed like coincidence now felt like a pattern carved by unseen hands. Whispers spread that Yu had discovered something tangible. A note, a list, a recording, evidence that might explain not only Lu's disappearance but the machinery of silence itself. Yet that evidence, like his phone, vanished as if erased by design. The eerie symmetry of their fate sent chills through the public. Two young stars devoured by the same shadow, two warnings disguised as tragedies. It was no longer about one man's death or one woman's disappearance, but about the invisible thread tying them together. A thread spun from fear, secrecy, and control. In exposing that link, you may have unknowingly stepped into the same darkness that took her, leaving behind a question that no one could safely answer. What began as grief soon ignited into defiance. Across every platform, from Weibo to foreign forums, fans refused to let Yu Menglong's story fade into silence. They shared his photos, replayed his interviews, and gathered fragments of his final days like clues in a collective investigation. Hashtags turned into movements. Hashtag justice for Yu Menglong. Hashtag find Lu Jirong. Uniting strangers across continents in the pursuit of truth. What authorities dismissed as rumor became a digital uprising, built not on violence but on devotion. People began working together like unseen detectives, analyzing timestamps, locations, and cryptic messages, driven by the belief that Yu had died protecting something that mattered. His tragedy became a mirror reflecting their own suppressed voices, the quiet anger of those who had once accepted injustice as normal. Tianyu Media's silence only deepened the outrage. Every unanswered question became proof of guilt in the public eye. And yet, beneath the rage there was tenderness too. A shared understanding that this fight was no longer just for one man or one woman, but for every soul silenced by power. The uprising was not chaos. It was remembrance turned into resistance, a promise that truth would no longer die quietly. At the height of the storm, when outrage and sorrow blurred into one, a quiet realization settled over those who still followed the case. Yu Menglong had become more than a name in a tragedy. He was now a symbol of integrity in a world built on deception, a reminder that kindness can be both a gift and a curse. His final smile, captured in that last video, no longer looked ordinary. It carried the weight of farewell, of someone who knew the price of truth yet chose to face it anyway. People began to see his story not just as a death, but as a testament to courage, the courage to remain gentle in a system that rewards cruelty. In his silence they heard resistance. In his fall they saw the reflection of countless others who had been forced to bend. That moment, fragile yet profound, marked the emotional peak of the collective grief. It was no longer only about seeking answers, but about honoring the light of a man who refused to be broken. His loss became their awakening. Proof that even when silenced, truth has a voice, and it speaks through the hearts brave enough to remember. No evidence has ever proven murder. No one knows what truly happened that night. But what's certain is this: Yu Menglong's story forced millions to question what hides behind the spotlight. And somewhere between his last breath and her last message lies the answer. This is not just a story about death. It's about the cost of speaking the truth.